Well, good morning, average homesteaders. Today we're going to pack corn in these little jars and can it. Now, every year you get sweet corn from the local stands or you grow your own and you just love it, but it is a short-lived happiness. Around here in the north, that sweet corn comes to us right around the end of July, in August, and then by September it's basically gone. And then you think for the next year coming, boy, I miss that corn. I can't wait until it comes back again. Well, I'm here to tell you there's a way of preserving that goodness for you to have during the winter months. What you can do is you can can that corn. Now, the items you're going to need to do this is the corn. And then you can get one of these. This is from Pampered Chef. This will take your corn off the cob. It's a pretty good tool. I recommend it. There's many other tools that are made by different companies that'll get the job done as well. You're also going to need a canning set. You can get these at a local Walmart or even dollar stores. They're not very expensive whatsoever, and it basically has everything you need to do to get your product into the jars and get the jars out of your pressure cooker. You're going to need jars and lids. Now, I'm going to use half-pint jars because it's just my wife and I here, and for a simple meal, this is all we would need. You need canning salt if you want to use it. You don't necessarily have to use the canning salt. You're also going to need a pressure cooker. Corn has to be pressure cooked. And you're going to need a pot with some hot water in it. And if you're going to use salt, of course, a measuring spoon. That's about all you need to get this done. So let's get started. Now, first things first, your jars need to be clean, washed with soap and water, and you need to warm the jars up. I put mine in the oven at about 170 degrees for about 20 minutes. It warms the jars. It helps neutralize anything that's inside of it. And also, when you put the hot water in the jars, it keeps the jars from blowing up from the heat being dumped in. Now, the method I'm going to use for the corn is called cold packing. Now, there is another method called heat packing where you boil the corn for about 5 minutes, and then you pack the corn with the water into the jars. Now, I'm not going to do that method. I'm doing a raw pack. So here we go. Take your funnel. Take your corn and you fill up your jars. Now you want to fill up your jars to right about where the turn is, where the rim for turning on your caps and your rings, and that's called leaving headspace. You got to leave a certain amount of room, headspace, in your jars so they don't overexpand and blow up during the canning process. If you overfill, your lids can and most likely will fail. Okay, now that you have your jars all filled, you want to just push it down just a little bit. Now, if you're cold packing, you can pack your corn tighter than if you were hot packing. Now, the process of hot packing will shrink the corn, and it'll be more pliable and smaller, and it'll fit into these jars, taking up less space. Now that's hot packing. Now if you cold pack, the corn is going to shrink a little bit from what you see here once it cooks. Okay, got the corn in the jars. I chose to put salt in with my half pint. I'm using 1/4 teaspoon of canning salt. If you're going to use larger jars, of course, double that size. Now that I got the corn in the jars, I put salt in there. It's time to put hot water in there. Now this water was boiling when I took it off the stove top. So you want to add your water and be mindful to leave your headspace. A rule of thumb is generally 1 inch, but I find that I like to put just a little bit more, just where, like I said, where the jar goes to turn for the threads. I leave that space above there. Okay, once you have your water in your jars, you're going to take this tool that comes with your kit, or you can use a wooden spoon, whatnot. You just put it in your jars, kind of press down, stab down a little bit, and what you're trying to do is get rid of any air pockets that are trapped in between the vegetable and the jar. And that with corn, it's so small that generally you don't have much of an issue with it, but better safe than sorry. Okay, now that is done. The next step is to clean the top of your jars. What I got is a little bit of vinegar in a clean rag, and you want to clean the tops of your jars before you put your lids on to make sure there's no debris, no salt, no corn remnants on top of it. You want your lids to be able to have a good clean surface to be able to seal. Okay. Next, you want to put your lids on. Now, years past, they used to tell you to put your lids in hot water to soften up the seal. Nowadays, they're not recommending it. I mean, the product has come a long way from years ago that you basically don't need to do that. These seals are much better than they used to be, and they actually say now you could damage the seals if you put it in hot water. Now, I know there's people out there that'll probably say, I'm going to do it anyways. It's the way I've always done it. So be it. I'm just passing on the new information that has been put out there. Okay, now that you got your lids on, you put your bands on. Now what you do is you hand tighten your lids. You don't want to crank it down with gorilla strength because the jars vent a little bit as they're cooking. Now, corn has to be pressure cooked. There's not enough acidity in it to prevent anything from growing it as it's being stored. Now, quite a few people can say, I'm scared to death of pressure canning. The thing might blow up. It's really not that hard. If you do a little bit of research and you pay attention, it's easy. Now, when preparing your pressure canner for use, you want to follow the manufacturer's directions. For mine, it calls for 2 to 3 inches of water. You don't want to have any more than that because it could cause too much pressure inside of your canner. So follow the directions of the manufacturer. Now, the pressure canners come with a tray in them, and you want to use that tray. Don't use them without the tray. It keeps the jars from being directly on the bottom of the pan where the heat is at. Okay, when it comes to your lid, look at the gauge. If your pressure canner comes with a gauge, look at the gauge, make sure it's on 0 when it's not in use. And you have your vent right here. You want to make sure the vent is open. I'll just blow through the vent and it tells me that it's open and functional. Also, you want to make sure your seal is in good shape. It doesn't have rips in it, that it's still pliable. Okay, let's get these jars in the water. Now, this is a small batch, so it's not going to take up a lot of space in this pressure canner. This tool I'm using comes in your kit for canning, and it lets you grip the jars from the top, and it holds it very well. This water is super hot, and when you go to get your jars out of the canner, everything is going to be super hot times 10,000. Now that I got my jars in there, I evenly space them. You don't need to, you can pack them wall to wall if you want. It depends on how many jars you're trying to do. Now, I've had my pressure canner running while I was doing the prep work for this, so it's already partially heated up. My vent is venting pretty well. A lot of steam is coming up. I don't know if you can see it or not. So at this point, what you want to do is you want to set a timer for 10 minutes and let this continue to vent for 10 minutes. After that, you put your weight on and you start your cooking time. Okay, it's been 10 minutes since my pressure cooker has been venting, and now it's time to put on the weight. Now, safety tips, put it on like that. Go from the side, don't go directly above it when trying to put it on. That steam is pretty hot. Now at this point, you can start your timer for cooking. Okay, once you get your weight on your vent, you're going to wait for your pressure gauge to get up to 10 pounds of pressure, or if you live in a different area that requires more pressure, just adjust accordingly. According to the Book of Knowledge, the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving, it says pint jars, you pressure cook them with corn in them for 55 minutes, quart jars 85 minutes. Now these jars are half pints, so I'm going to do 45 minutes and that should be plenty good. So as you can see, my pressure gauge is starting to rise. I've already turned the heat down for my canner, and you need to pay good attention to your pressure until you get it regulated. Now I'm cooking on a glass top stove. Some people say, oh, you can't can on them. Yes, you can. The manufacturer says you can. No problems. The only real issue is regulating the heat for your canner is not as easy as if you're using regular flame, as in gas or propane type stove, because those you can just turn the heat down and the heat source immediately is reduced. Now with the electric induction top stove, it cools down slower, so it's basically a slower process, and that's the only issue. It's no big deal as far as I'm concerned. You just need to mind your canner, and once you have your canner under pressure, you need to mind your canner so you don't have any issues. Okay, we've reached 10 pounds on the pressure gauge. I've reduced the heat on the canner already. Now I'm going to pay attention to the gauge and adjust accordingly to try to get it as closest to 10 as I possibly can. I'm going to start my timer As I said, these are half pint jars that I'm using. A full pint you would want to do for 55 minutes. These are half pints, so I'm going to do them for 45 minutes, and that should be sufficient. Okay, I'm up to 10 and I'm maintaining pressure. Actually, I'm just a slight over it. Some people do recommend to pressure cook at 11 and not 10. I think it's just a personal preference, but nonetheless, I'm well within my range and I'm not over pressuring my canner, and this should do well for the corn. Now, as I said, this is an induction electric glass top type stove. Let me show you the setting that is maintaining this pressure. That is basically barely on. Now, it does take a lot more heat when you first start out to get your canner venting and to start building pressure, but once you put your cover on your vent, reduce your heat to less than half, and then keep your eye on it for a good 10 minutes. And the canner will start adjusting, and you just pay attention. Eventually you're going to reduce the heat down to basically where I have mine, to barely on, and then you'll maintain your 10 pounds of pressure. Now my timer is already going. Once I hit 10, which was a little bit ago, I still have about 32 minutes to go until the cooking process is done. Okay, the cooking process is done. What you do now is you turn the heat off your canner, slide it over to get off the heat process, and you let it cool down until the pressure reaches 0. You don't want to open it up now. I think that'd be pretty self-explanatory. Don't pull off your cover to your vent to try to vent it sooner. Just let it do its process to cool down to 0. It doesn't take that long before you can open up your canner. Okay, my canner reads 0 pressure. I'm going to go ahead and take the vent cover off. No steam is coming out. Now when you open the lid of your pressure canners, you want to keep your face out from under it. The best way to do it is to open it, lift up away from your face. That keeps any steam that's still within the canner away from blasting you. Okay, let's get our jars. Looks pretty good. Head space looks good. Now you're going to want to place your jars wherever you want to place them, first of all. They are going to be very hot, so take that in consideration. But place them and have them about an inch or a little less apart while they cool. Okay, my jars are out of the canner, and they've got a little bit of space in between them. They're going to be very hot right now. Now, as they cool, you're going to hear the lids pop, which means they're basically getting their seal. You're going to want to leave these cans for, some people say 24 hours, some say 14. I'm going to leave them until tomorrow before I take the rings off. And then you can take a damp cloth and just clean them real quick. During the canning process, they can get a little bit of debris on them. Some people put vinegar in their canners as they're canning, and that helps keep a little bit off of it. It's not necessary. You're still probably going to wipe them off anyways. But after you do that, you could test your seals, and if everything looks good, you put them on your shelf. Of course, date them, and you've got some good preserved sweet corn. All right, thank you for coming along.